Welcome, Rebecca. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah, to know a little bit more about Rebecca before we get started. She's a book artist, a printer, a writer, a bookbinder. She's published very innovatively designed letterpress printed limited edition fine press and book arts under Pie in the Sky Press. I told her already she has the best Zoom background I've ever seen. It's a pretty low humble brag. And I mean that with love. Pie in the Sky Press was started in 1986. And as a self-taught naturalist and citizen scientist, Rebecca's artist books examine the intersection of her artistic and scientific interests by collecting and cataloging the natural world. Rebecca, your work is stunning. It's amazing. All of my friends have heard about it because I've been so enamored with your process. We've been lucky here at Hamilton to show your work in the New Impressions exhibition. And I really appreciate you for showing with us. And I'm so glad that we've seen your work in person and that you did this today. So thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for asking me.
Yeah.
So here I am. Welcome to Pie in the Sky Press, which is conveniently located in the living room of my suburban home. I'm one of the very fortunate ones in that I have been able to carry on my work during the pandemic because I have everything here, as you can see. That, you know, and there's other stuff in this room. I'm sitting at a long custom height table with paper storage, and you can see, you know, all my stuff in my beloved press. So I'm going to get started. Primarily what I'm going to talk about today is my image making process. This process has become really important to my work. And so I'm going to start kind of at the beginning. So I'm going to share my screen. And oops, wrong one. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I have two PDFs that we're going to look through. So here we are at the ham hang. So to start with, I got my beginnings in letterpress printing when I was a student at, now why won't this advance with the, this is always kind of an issue.
Yeah, it is always a little funny. Can you use your keyboard?
There we go.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so I started my letterpress career when I was a graphic design student in the early 80s at Otis Parsons School of Art and Design, a new division of the New School for Social Research. And this is kind of the cast of crazy people I went to school with. And the department was that I was in Comm Arts was chaired by Sheila de Bretteville, who was one of the founders of the Women's Building. And she brought letterpress into the curriculum. So I took a class my first year as a sophomore and set my name in lead type, put it in a Vandercook 219 and printed it, and my life was changed forever. I mean, honest to goodness, I went, this is it. This is what I want to do. So here's another picture of me in all my early 80s glory with my best friends. So I was being a graphic designer and making artist books for many years. And I went to the college, and I also teach at Otis, the College Book Arts Association in 2009, and saw this presentation by Dan Meyer. And he talked about photopolymer plate making and also discussed using a feature in Photoshop to create a stochastic dot to render a continuous tone image that you could print letterpress. And it's called diffusion dither. And so here is the toast test that he gave all the participants. And these are done with diffusion dither or a stochastic dot bitmap filter in Photoshop. So at my disposal, I have at school, I don't have this at home, this plate maker. And we also have a inkjet printer with proprietary ink and a RIP system to make negatives. And it makes very high quality negatives. So I'm also lucky in that I can buy plate material and do a lot of printing without having to send out and pay how much it costs to get somebody else to make your plates. So my first project that I started thinking about using the stochastic dot was this project with, it was a book of poetry by a Los Angeles poet named Martha Ronk, and called My Partial Tongue. And in it, she uses language from a 17th century essayist named Sir Thomas Browne, who wrote about the order of nature and gardens and plants. And that kind of archaic language made me think about like 18th century naturalists. And I kind of had this feeling I wanted to make it look like a naturalist journal where the images of the plant are pressed into the pages of the book, like this image. This just kills me. This kind of weedy looking plant pressed into the journal of Asa Gray, who was a contemporary of Darwin. And other things I was looking at the time were 18th or 19th century chromolithographs and herbariums. And these are images from Emily Dickinson's herbarium, which is very beautiful. So I thought a lot about how to make these images and started doing tests. I'm an early adopter of the Macintosh, so I do all the graphic design for my books on the computer, but I use all handset type. So there's this kind of old and new thing going on in my work, and I use computer technology and digital technology to make my images. So this one, I was scanning these plant images for this book. So they would look pressed. And this is a wild cucumber. And so what I did with this series of prints was make flat areas of color and then use the stochastic dot to create the contour and the shadow. And so this is what it looks like when it's combined. You can see the solid green and then the dot plate printed over it in type registration. So some of the other images you can see here, this is a little more complicated than the cucumber. It's a Johnny jump up, and my son used to call them jolly jump ropes. Anyway, so I've always loved this image before the black is printed over it. And then here's another image that was printed in 4 colors. So you can see the solid green, the pink, then the yellow in the center of the rose, and then the black plate. And this, provides the contour, shadows, and detail for the image. And here it is printed in the book. So you can see the poem, and my beautiful 72-point Bodoni. And here's, when I was putting this presentation together, I looked back at some of these images and I really love them. I mean, at the time, each of the steps in my process, as the images became more sophisticated and more complicated, I was thrilled every step of the way. So this is a fern I pulled out from the side of my house, a feather. And this image I made into a print, and it is by far one of the most popular things I've ever printed. And then these little feathers. So you can see the solid color and the diffusion dither dot that creates the detail. So a few years later, there was another book in the intervening years, but about this time, my book started taking 2 years. I was kind of on the codex plan, where I would give myself 2 years to develop the concept, figure out the imagery, write the book, design the book, and print it. So this book was, I live on the edge of kind of development. My house is across the street from a wildland park where I walk every day with my dogs. And I wanted to do a project about what that place and what the plants mean to me. So this book is where stucco meets chaparral, which is where I live. So I did some printing tests, and this little image of a California sagebrush used some of the kind of the technique I used before with my partial tongue, and I wasn't really happy with it. Kind of every project, I kind of upped the ante. And these images and the technology I use, respond to what I want these images to do in the project. So I was still scanning the plant images. This is a yerba santa. So you can see this is the raw scan, and then I clean it up, remove the background. And then with this one, rather than making flat areas of color, I used the 50% threshold. I made bitmap images for the color. And so you can see that is a bitmap image. This is so that one is the yellow, the blue, purple, and then the black, again, is the plate that carried the detail and the shadow detail. So here it is. These are the steps, the yellow and the green, and then you can see them combined here. And then here's the purple. And this is that image printed in the book. So with each chapter was about a particular native plant. There were 8 of them. And each chapter began with a very detailed image of the plant and the herbarium data. And I also have a really pretty nice little collection of wood type, and this is some my wood type. Oops, it doesn't like that. So for each of my projects, I usually do a series of prints that goes with the deluxe edition, which in some cases is bound in leather or has a fancier binding in a box with the prints. And so for this book, for Where Stucco Meets Chaparral, I wanted to do a series of prints about the native plants in Corriganville. So this is a Quercus lobata, my favorite valley oak. And you can see the image was scanned. And then these are the bitmap images. So that's the series of them. And then finally, the black is the stochastic dot. And this is when I started really thinking about color to try to make the images look as naturalistic as possible. So rather than traditional 4-color, these images were made with and each plant had a slightly different green. So these mixes were different for each of them. But this is a light kind of green yellow, a darker green, a brown, and then the black. Excuse me. So here's the light green plate in the press. And it's printed. And then the dark green, excuse me. And you can see them combined. And then finally the brown. And then the black on top of that. So here's a couple images from that series. This is the cottonwood. So you can see kind of the detail from the bit mapping and also the dot. And then this is a Coast live oak. Incidentally, this print, this little 9x12 print, won Best in Show at New Impressions in American Letterpress, Hamilton's first New Impressions show. And to say I was thrilled is like, an understatement, because there was such fabulous work in the show, much more, bigger and dramatic than this quiet little print that ended up winning. So it kind of shows you it's all in the juror. If you make work that resonates with the jury, and it's just the luck of the draw. So up until this point, I was printing on this press, the sweetest press in the world, Vandercook 4, that I bought in 1985 when I graduated from art school. It was a little funkier looking for the 30 years I printed on it. This is it dressed up to sell because I don't have space for 2 presses, and I got this press, which is what I have now, and you can see behind me here in my little studio shop. This is a Vandercook Universal 3 power press with an extended bed, and it just fits in here. And the press was in, it was clean enough. It wasn't rusty or anything, but it did need about a year's worth of rehab before we got rid of the 4 and moved it into the house. My husband replaced all the switches. We had the carriage motor rebuilt. He restored the adjustable bed, and it had a warped feed board, which my brother-in-law made a new one. And it just is, it's an incredible press. It runs like a little sewing machine. Images that I want to make because of the ability to do very, it says my internet is unstable. I hope I didn't freeze.
You froze for just a second.
Okay, good. So you can do these kind of teeny tiny little adjustments and keep track of the adjustments you make, and which is important to me. You'll see in a bit how I kind of keep track of everything when I'm working on these. I'll show you. So this is the gripper stop is adjustable, and it has a paper delivery system, this tape system on the tower, which holds the paper in place on the cylinder as you print. On the 4, I became very good at holding on to the paper until the very last second and then catching it again on the other side to keep it tight against the cylinder. And I didn't have any issues with registration, but from this point on, my images became more complicated. I also used a 3/4 point crop mark as my registration system. And this is my incredible, I search high and low for the perfect loop. This big lighted loop is the perfect thing. So the next book I wanted to work on is a memoir from when I was a preteen. And I grew up in San Pedro at the coast and spent a lot of time. I had a free range childhood where, I left the house in the morning and I was just required to come back for dinner. And so I spent a lot of time at the beach in the tide pools and decided I wanted to collect marine animals in a saltwater aquarium in my bedroom where I pretty much watched them die. So this is a memoir of that time in my life. And the images I wanted were of marine animals, which, of course, I couldn't take them home and scan them. So at this point, I started photographing my imagery. And so this is, and on my Nikon digital SLR, I had a macro lens and a polarizing filter so I could shoot through water. Because it would be impossible to take this sort of imagery by removing this animal from the water. And then other animals, I was devoted to not letting anything die. So no animals lost their lives in the making of this book. This is a chestnut cowrie with its mantle coming out. And this is a dead shell, but a Norris top snail, and Kellett's whelk with a little, it's got a little hitchhiker snail on it. So this is what I was talking about. As my images became more complicated and the plate making became more critical, the way I was exposing my plates became very important, and I did a lot of tests. And luckily I had the ability to do that because of the equipment at school. So I started keeping these journals about this time. I'd always kept a lot of notes, but these journals became really important to my process. So This is a giant keyhole limpet. It's a foot, and there it is in the tide pools, and then my plates. I also write kind of compulsively about paper, how many sheets I can get out, how much it's going to cost. You know, this is, you know, what you do in your project journals. And then, so you can see these are different tests. And in one says, where's the detail? I ask about one of these things, and then one has too much detail. So I started figuring out, where is that? Well, I guess we'll come to it. This is a Ocher's sea star that I pulled out, kind of pried off the rock so I could take a picture of it. And this is it removed from the background and color corrected. And with these images, I decided to try using the diffusion dither, or the stochastic dot, in each of the 4 colors. So this is the magenta, and you can see the channels that I use to make my separations in Photoshop. So that's magenta, and I'm using a 200 pixels per inch dither on these images. Then that's the yellow, blue, what? Cyan. And this is the image printed in the book. So also, this is an image of probably my favorite animal, which is a California brown sea hare. And they're very, it's a slug, basically. So here it is, removed from the background and color corrected. And the yellow, magenta, cyan, and black plate. And here it is printed in the book. So this book had a number of different narratives running through it. It had the plates, of course. I had some poems from a reverend naturalist from the 18th century named Reverend Wood, who did a lot of books about naturalism. And then, of course, my memoir. And in the back, it had a section of field notes. So here is the entire book laid out in my studio so I can collate it. And this represents more than a summer of printing. I am not afraid of reprinting something if it doesn't meet my satisfaction. I do all the images first and then print the type. Of course, this is all handset type, and I spend quite a long time doing the handset type. I like to be able to set the entire book, but I have had situations where I've had to set, distribute, and reset in order to get all the text in the book. And then I print the type last, because I figured the type is the easy part. So the next project is giant. And this is about a particular tree that I visit every day when I take my walks with the dogs that I love, a 400-year-old valley oak. So with these images, they presented kind of a different problem in that I didn't want to scan them. I took photographs of them because I wanted more contour. I was kind of, I learned after the marine animals that kind of a more naturalistic, less pressed into the pages of the book was an approach I wanted to take. So this is a little acorn. And I tried using, I'm going to show you this kind of early failure with these images. Because with the marine animals, I pumped up the color in order to get the most vibrant color I could. So I did the same thing with the image of the little acorn here, and then printed it 200 ppi using the same sort of inks that I used on the marine animals, and I was really unhappy. It looked too harsh, didn't look natural. I thought it really needed to be smoother. So I kind of went back to the drawing board and came up with a different approach than using traditional 4-color with these particular images, because they were all green and they just didn't lend themselves to that sort of approach. So it's kind of going back to what I did in Cmyk Chaparral, where I use custom colors to create the images. So you can see, rather than the yellow, it's kind of a green yellow. The cyan is more of a teal. The magenta is browner, and then the black has a lot of transparent white in it. So this is that journal with the steps of the separation and the final image. Here's this plate, so you can. These images, these fallen leaf images, I wanted to play with, because up until this point, all of the images had been like specimen images where they were removed from the background. And with this, I wanted to play around again with traditional 4-color and see what I could do. So I took a bunch of images of these fallen leaves, and then this is the color correction, and the plates: yellow, magenta, cyan, and black. And then this is the image printed. And I was thrilled with these images. It was a nice addition and a kind of a change of pace with these images, rather than just having specimens, to be able to show something a little more abstract and kind of more sort of emotional. So I'm going to switch now to my second thing here.
Do you mind if I ask a quick question before you switch?
Oh,
while
help
you
yourself.
switch? Okay, there was a really good question about how you determine the correct color inks to substitute for the CMYK. Like, how do you determine the colors to use?
By testing. I always kind of try to tell people that my process, I don't think, is for the faint of heart, because I'm an obsessive person, and I keep these journals and I test and test and test and print them over and over again until I get them the way I want them. And that's how I do it, just by, I'll print, and you can't tell until you until you print the black. And then you can evaluate it and kind of go back. And, I do a little bit of soft proofing in InDesign, which is helpful, but you can't really tell until you put ink on paper.
Thank you. Your control of the process is stunning. Thank you for sharing this.
Well, I'm lucky. I have to say, I'm lucky that I have the equipment to use, the support at school. The manager of our lab prints my negatives. She's very good at it. And, I do have the press at home and all that. So, I have to really kind of acknowledge my luckiness and my privilege involving with this stuff, because it does help to be able to, really go crazy making tests and all that. So this is, now we're coming closer to now. At the start of the pandemic last March, I was, trapped at home like everybody else. California had a very strict stay-at-home order, and I had to go just immediately to printing online. I mean, to teaching online. And so I was home, which is not a bad thing, because I spend a lot of time at home. But I was looking for diversions, and for many years I had fed wild birds in my backyard, but the tree that the feeder hung from had succumbed to root rot. So I replaced it with a young valley oak that I grew from an acorn, but it was far too spindly to hold my feeder. So we came up with this sort of shepherd's hooks to hang them from. So this is a squirrel-proof feeder. And then I to it for the mockingbirds and the jays and the wrens, and syrup for the hummingbirds and the orioles. And this is Niger seed, a thistle seed for the little goldfinches. And then my husband, for my birthday, made me this platform with a baking tray, and it has peanuts for the jays, mealworms for the mockingbirds, shelled peanuts, and it has something for everybody. So, and of course, fresh water on a drip system is always good. And they come and they drink the water and take baths, and it's very entertaining. So when I, started really getting into watching these birds, I found this 500mm lens for my camera and started taking pictures of them. And it started as kind of entertainment. Here's a black Phoebe. This is a very important bird, and the saga of the black Phoebe made me decide that this little passion would become a book. So you have to read the book to find out about the black Phoebe. And here's this is a Cooper's hawk, and they don't eat any of the feeders, but he sure wonders what all the fuss is about. And this is a young one, you can tell because it's so stripy. And I started learning a lot about birds, which is what I do when I become interested in something. And I also discovered this opportunity called Project Feeder Watch, where the Cornell Institute of Ornithology has a yearly program where backyard bird feeders count the birds that come to their yards and report the data. And you get to be a citizen science, which to me is the best thing ever. So this is a Natal's woodpecker. This is a oak titmouse, which is one of my favorites because he has this jaunty little crest. And this is a winter visitor, female white-crowned sparrow, and her male counterpart. And the mockingbird, I only have one, but I love this bird. And this is a male hooded oriole. This is a springtime visitor. And the jay, who loves peanuts. Hummingbirds. And a Buick wren, really tiny little bird. And this is a California quail with a bee. And in some ways, watching birds out my studio window, it's like a little nature show is going on. So this is a kind of ratty looking male spotted towhee and his very demanding baby. Here he's feeding it. And the parents, the older birds generally go to higher elevations in the wintertime, but the baby stuck around. And you can see here he is in his very, very kind of funky looking adolescent time. And here he is just kind of really getting his big boy clothes. But you can tell he's not fully mature because he doesn't have that bright red eye that you can see in his father. Whoops, I've skipped. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Okay, I was going to show you see how red that eye is? That's the adult red eye. Very striking bird. So not quite grown up. And here he is just the other day. And he's so handsome. And his eye is bright red. And I'm sure he'll be very popular this breeding season. So when I started thinking about images, I did some teaching for Seattle School of Visual Concepts and also took some of their classes. And I took I watched a reduction class by Mary Bruno. So I decided there goes dogs, to try reduction linoleum as a first step towards thinking about how I was going to make images for this book. So this is the black Phoebe, a 4-color reduction. And then a house sparrow and a jay. So that was really fun and really different. And I thought at one point that this was going to be it, but I'd taken all these incredible photographs and I really wanted to investigate using them in the book. So I started going down this road of testing and thinking about ways of making images that were new, that were relevant to the story I wanted to tell, and used the photographs I'd been taking. So here, this is a male. It wasn't
Rebecca,
it.
you
And
froze a little
then,
bit. Oop, do you mind repeating
yeah.
that one more time? Thanks.
Okay, so this is a male house sparrow. No, house finch, sorry. And then I tried a duotone. So this is an image made with kind of a sepia and an orange ink. And I liked it okay, but it wasn't, it felt a little muddy and wasn't really what I was looking for. So this is an image of a male Allen's hummingbird that just has turned his head so the sun is catching his incredible throat feathers. And so I tried making plates and an image with this using the bright ink and 4-color process. And this is what I got. And I also upped my PPI quite a bit to 250. And I've, realized that was kind of the point of diminishing returns, where this print has some wonderful moments, I think. The fact that I've lost all the blue from the background, it's just fallen off, areas have blown out. It just felt like I needed to go back to the drawing board. And so I started playing around with this particular image of a female. This is a lesser goldfinch, and just to try some different things to see what happened. So the first thing I tried was masking out the body of the bird that's yellow, and then the background. And I had seen this, another Seattle SVC class called Uncommon Color with Mike from Clawhammer Press. And he was doing gradations with Linoleum and changing the angles of the gradation. So I wanted to play around with that. So, and then there was, to add to that, I wanted to put one detailed dither plate on top of it to see what would happen. So this is that image. And so the gradation of the yellow bird goes from the right to the left, and the background goes from the top to the bottom. Starts kind of, creamy orange color, goes down to green, and then the detail from the dither plate. And this was interesting. I think it needed some work. It kind of lacked what I can only say is sparkle or something. And I also printed it on toned paper. And so I kind of went down this rabbit hole of seeing what would happen if I printed on different sorts of paper than I had before, whereas I'd always used the most wonderful and smooth paper for these images, particularly in at low water, where I used a Japanese paper that has just almost a plate finish on one side. So these are 4-color images. And so this is printed on Zircon text wove. And this is a 4-color image. And I took the black out of the background, trying to highlight the shape of the bird. And then this is on, you can see how much difference paper makes. So that's Zircon. And this is Reeves Heavyweight, which is a much more absorbent, soft paper. And then Somerset text wove. There goes the puppy. And then this is 4-color on this is Knitagen paper, Hammermule Knitagen, which is kind of has a sort of sandy tone and these beautiful wavy chain lines from the manufacturer of the paper. And this image, I'm pretty excited about this image actually, because it has a quality that my images haven't had before. And so I'm thinking, there's things I need to improve on it. These two are 250 PPI, and I think that's just you start to lose detail. I don't like the way that the background gets choppy and all that. So, I'm still working on it, but this is kind of where I am with the image making process with this book right now. And then finally, this is that woodpecker, and I think he's trying to keep his balance because he's a little too big for the perch on the hummingbird feeder, but he did this beautiful display of his wings. And so one of the ideas I have is to use this image of his wings for the cover of the book. And this is printed, this is two-step gold. It's a varnish and a gold paste that's printed on Tom Balbo's cloud cotton paper. And that's that. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second and see if there's any questions so far. Check the time. And, I'm going to, yeah. Any questions so far?
There were a couple. One specifically, and it was Tom Parsons, and he was asking about the making the negatives process, and you went more into it. So Tom, if you have more, if there was a question you had that didn't get answered, please speak up or raise your hand or put it over in the side. And then also, what is the extended bed for on your Vandercook Universal 3? It's got an extended bed.
Well, it just gives you more press. It's not printing area. It's just, I put stuff on it. On my 4, I didn't have anywhere to really put things. The feed board was relatively small. I have this giant feed board. And also there's a tray where I keep planers and my loop and some other stuff. On the end, I have my solvents and some rags and my roller height adjustment, roller height gauge, and the key for the coins and all that stuff. So it's just, another surface.
Like having another arm, right? Like, yes, right there.
Yeah.
And I know you're going to share some of your, I would say, go ahead. I think share those. That'll be good.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to screen sharing, but this time we're going to go to the webcam, and I'm just going to show you some of the journals. So hopefully you can see this. So this is, there were two journals for this book, but I'm just going to show you the first one. This is At Low Water, and you can kind of see the madness here. So, I do a lot, everything, when I'm working on a project, every thought I have, I try to put in these things. And it's kind of the ramblings of a crazy person in a lot of ways. And I also think that the line length is too long. So I fold these. This is what it's called, Lloydstrom Master, and it's got a little dot grid. And these are my favored journals. And so I fold the paper in half and write in 2 columns. The different colored inks are not meaningful. I am a fountain pen aficionado, enthusiast. And so sometimes I'll go, oh, I want to try this pen for a minute. Some people think it's some kind of, crazed color coding, but it's really not. And so this is some of the early tests doing 4-color images. This is actually kind of, this isn't 4-color, but playing around with making images of the tide pools themselves. And these found their way into the book. So, and this is one of the early 4-color tests. I'd say it's too pink, but you can see there's, a lot of my thought process, a lot of the writing of the content, the testing of the images, planning of the project. These are exposure tests, and it kind of goes on and on and on. I ended up hating this image, went back to the drawing board. These are some of the binding dummies. It's like the whole process is here. And if you don't have a way of keeping track of your thought process and your planning, I really recommend this, because I can go back and, I'm always surprised about what I was thinking about. I forget, but in order to have it all in one place, rather than, I used to have little scraps of newsprint, anything I could find, I would do sketches on and whatever. So that's the first journal for that book. And then Giant, these big projects often have 2 journals. So this is for Giant. And it started out as being just a book about trees. So, and then I was looking at forest bathing, and I also went to Yale and took and looked at this little book by Mary Gibbs Shapner called Notes on Various Trees, which was very, I was very inspired by that book. And then was drawing leaves. Here's that little print that won Best in Show. And more leaves, pictures of the area. And then about somewhere along the line, this tree, the tree that became the subject of the book, we'd had months of rain, which is very unusual in Southern California. The ground was just saturated. And then we had a storm with 50 miles per hour winds. The tree was already heavy with moisture that it had soaked into the bark, and it uprooted and died. And so that made kind of directed the book in another direction. And I feel like I have to be open to that. If something happens, I change my mind, it just can change. So these are some images of the tree. You can see there, that's a dog for scale. It was huge, really huge. So here's all my image testing, I was playing around with cutting out shapes. It was like that year at Codex, laser cuts were all the rage. I had a little plotter cutter and some of the early tests, and then trying it on different paper and different approaches. So it goes on and on. And then here's the second one, more tests, ink drawdowns. And then this is the journal for the bird book. I decided to make a handmade journal, and I'm just not as happy with it because I don't like the paper as much as the Leuchtturm. But I started looking at, backyard bird watching became sort of a thing at the beginning of the pandemic, and sales of bird seeds went up. I mean, it's really interesting in some urban areas. Birdsong became quieter because it didn't need to compete with noise of traffic. And so a lot of writing, some drawings. Here's the image from the Mary Bruno thing I did, some early, my sketches, and then these prints. So then I have all the images that I've been working on for the 4-color approach. So those are the journals. And now I'm going to go back to look at you. So that's what I got for you.
I think we should clap first. That was amazing. Thank you, Rebecca.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So yeah, journals. They're the thing. I wish you could go through them. They're whenever I've shown them to people, people have been very interested in looking at them.
And I've also been Googling to try and see what's the name and the size of those again, because they do look hefty.
Yeah, they're really big. They're called Leuchtturm. Here, let me see. It's spelled LEUCHTTURM 1917. And this particular size that I use is the master, and because they make A5s and all that. And they have a fountain pen friendly paper, and I favor the dot grid. I don't like ruled paper. And I don't, the new one for the birds has blank paper, no dot, no grid. So I made this lines that I put underneath the sheet so I can write straight. Otherwise I write all over the place. Anyway,
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing your notebook secrets, because that's always a fun thing for everybody to get into.
yeah, yeah.
The
And
only
fountain pens.
Should we invite you back later to talk about fountain pens exclusively?
Yeah, really. Yes, I have many. It's a sickness. Yeah.
The only other question I saw was somebody was intrigued about the gold ink on that cover.
Okay. Okay, that is, it's called two-step gold. I'll actually pull it out of here. So what it is a varnish, gold varnish, and I need something to open this can, but it is kind of orange varnish. Maybe I'll get a screwdriver. Hopefully you can see this by me holding it up. I can get the can open. These cans. Okay, so see, it's orange and it's a varnish. And then you combine that with a gold paste. So it's, and I was turned on to this ink by Jessica Spring. Can you see in there?
There we go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and it's, the can's kind of heavy, and it makes a really, like, it's the best gold ever. You know, because it's very, it's metallic even on uncoated paper. And I've always been kind of disappointed with the way that gold printing ink prints on uncoated paper. It's just kind of this sort of unpleasant brown color. So yeah, the two-step gold is amazing. And this stuff is Hanco. That's who made the ink I have. Had it for a number of years. Kind of a little goes a long way. Yeah.
Well, those were the questions I had, but we still have a little bit of time. So if anybody has questions, you can either raise your hand, which should be at the bottom of your Zoom panel, or you can put it in the chat. And that way we can ask some more questions.
Yeah, come on, you guys, speak up.
Ooh, Jim Moran.
Oh,
Rebecca, this is maybe more comment than anything, but when I look at your separations and how technically thorough they are, it's just overwhelming. The work that you're doing seems more like what offset printers do because of the control that offset presses provide, but as a letterpress printer, that's phenomenal impression work. You must maintain that press like nobody's business. Your results are kind of staggering, I think.
well, I appreciate that. Yeah, you know, my husband is the maintenance department. I can't, you know, go without saying that. And so thanks to him and his support, this press, you know, the Vandercook 4 that I used for 30 years, I replaced a belt on it. That press just, but you know, it's kind of a bigger can of worms when you get involved with these power presses. But the press is amazing. You know, when I look back at my student work that I did as a sophomore, the letterpress printing I was doing then, I'm amazed because I was a good printer even then. And good printing has always been really important to me. You know, the right impression. You know, I always feel like somebody's going to take a loop and look at it, you know, and so printing well is really important to me. You know, it's not, I am usually never surprised by the time a project gets on press because I have it all figured out beforehand. You know, there really aren't any surprises left. So it's a different kind of printing than a lot of people do. With wood type, you know, it's not terribly spontaneous. I'm very interested in getting exactly what I want. And exactly what I want is to support the concept of the project so that nothing detracts from that, you know, like poor printing or whatever.
Yeah, because I would think dot gain is so easy to get on letterpress equipment, so that you must have to do a lot of testing to get just what you want. I was looking at your backgrounds because it's easier for me to see the benefits of stochastic working accurately, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your observation of that, because for the most part, it's all for me. I just do it to please myself. But when, especially another printer really looks at the work, it's very satisfying, really rewarding. So thank you for that.
Boy, thank you. This is phenomenal. I can't believe the results that you're getting, but I can see how much work it takes to get there. That's most impressive.
And it's a good thing I enjoyed that. I really do. And that's why, they take the projects take a long time, because I build in that kind of time to get what I want.
Mm-hmm.
You hear that puppy?
Yeah, actually oh yeah, go for it.
Ready? Come here, bud.
And then Vicky, I see you up there.
Here's Ready. Say hi. She goes, what's going on up here? Is there anything I can eat? Anything I can destroy? Yeah. There we go. That's Ready.
Do you find yourself working on basically one major project at a time? Or do you have multiple projects? I tend to get kind of overwhelmed by multiple projects.
I only really do one thing at a time. I had another project started that when I decided to work on this bird book, I abandoned it. And I don't know if I'll ever go back to it, but I really only have, I have a lot going on in my life. I have a family. I teach a lot of classes. And so, and for me to focus in the way that I need to focus, that I want to focus, it's really one project at a time for me.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of also goes to another question somebody is asking, is how many journals do you have going at a time?
Well, there's only one per book. So if I'm working on one project, there's one journal. Yeah, the others are in a bookshelf.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And once the project's done, I don't do anything else. That journal's done. Mm-hmm. So once.
We've taxed her internet with all of our questions. I am also, when she comes back, I'm going to ask, are you still there? Hi.
Are you talking to me?
I am. You went black for just a minute, but you're back.
Oh, God. I don't know what's going on.
It's the world we live in. I wanted to ask, do you have, this is a personal one that I'm interjecting. Do you have one as you come up with ideas? Is there a separate one where you have a running list? You said one project, one journal.
Well, I do. I also have a daily journal practice, and I'll, write in that. And I've started journals for projects that I've abandoned. And yeah.
Another question. Somebody said they were thrilled by your beautiful writing. What is your process for writing the text?
Well, it differs with the projects. With At Low Water, I sat down and wrote a lengthy story for that, and ended up editing a lot of it out as I went along, and kind of distilled it because it had a lot of stuff in it. This particular story, it was a long story. So it started with the story, and some of them, like We're Stuck on Meet Chaparral, I knew the kind of the sort of information I wanted. There were personal observations, natural history, the information about the plants. Everything sort of happened at once. And this bird book, it's kind of, everything's sort of happening at the same time. You know, I'm doing image work and writing as everything goes along. And I have a tendency to write in design, in the design. That seems to work best for me, rather than writing like in a Word doc, or, you know, usually starts longhand, and then I'll take it and I do like a lot of editing, you know, so everything fits that way.
Yeah, that's a smart way to do it. We've come up in the hour. We have just a couple more questions that I would love to ask. I think they'd be great to hear. I'm going to interject with a quick thing to say, so stick around, we can do a couple questions after, but I will say thank you for everyone who joined us. If you, okay, sorry, I'm still reeling after everything you said. So if you want to become a member, that is a really great way to support the museum and help make sure programming like this happens weekly. We are a nonprofit museum, and we're so glad to see all of your faces every week. And I know many of you are members. Thank you so much. Your support means so much to us here at Hamilton, because we still don't have our doors open. So if you can, that's a really nice way to support us, and I want to say thank you. Also, we do have more upcoming hangs. In fact, Bobby Rosenstock from Just a Jar Design is going to be with us next Friday. That's an addition. So if you haven't registered for that, you can go do that. I put the link in the chat. Oh, and I also put the brand new gallery. We have a gallery where you can interact with pieces in the collection. So you can go and check out those. So I want to say thank you so much. We'll stick around for a couple more questions. And then we can all have a good Friday afternoon. The couple of questions, one was textured paper. I think we all geeked out when you were talking about what papers you use. Do you have any other interesting ones that you've played with? And then somebody said that they actually have a lot of your prints on different paper at Lab Press.
Oh yeah, they have a lot of things. That's where I work. Well, paper is one of those things that I geek out about. And like, when I start a project, I start to think about the quality of the paper, and I usually order a whole bunch of different kinds of sheets and try them out. I'm fortunate that at least in non-pandemic times, I can drive my car to Hiromi Paper in Culver City, and I'll buy a sheet of this and a sheet of that. And in that way, I've discovered some incredible paper. And the paper, the way the images interact with the paper, I'm sure you all know, is a big part of it, you know. So, you know, I'm always looking for a paper that type prints on well. And, you know, I can get, and I print dry always, because it just doesn't work to do a lot of registration work on paper that's shrinking in. But I do print dry, so I look for. I think Vicky Saul has a question. Vicky? Ah.
Oh, Vicky, you're on mute.
Am I back?
You're back. You went black for a minute.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
It's today, right?
Yeah.
I think that's good. Vicky, you seemed happy. I'm going to say thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm so glad you came. Thank you, Rebecca, for an absolutely lovely presentation. That was stunning. And we're all much more nerdy for it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Steph,
Thanks, everybody, for coming.